Claire Whitfield was 33 years old the morning her father's will was read, and by the time she left the building she owned less than she had walked in with. She had walked in with a family. She left with a cabin. The conference room of Halloran and Reeve sat on the second floor of a brick building on Pearl Street in Boulder, Colorado. It was the second Tuesday of October. 3 chairs stood on one side of a long walnut table, and 1 chair stood alone on the other. Behind the empty chair, a window looked out at a sky the color of wet slate, heavy and low, pressing down on the roofs of the downtown blocks. Daniel Whitfield sat in the near chair, 41 years old, wearing a navy suit that fit like an argument he had already won. Rebecca Whitfield Ames sat beside him, 38, dressed in cream, holding her phone face down on her thigh as if it carried bad news she was not yet ready to read. Claire sat across from both of them in the same black cardigan she had worn to the funeral 6 weeks earlier, because she had not thought to buy anything new, because buying clothes had not occurred to her, because grief does not shop. The attorney, a man named Mr. Reeve, read the relevant clause flat, without inflection, the way a man reads a utility bill. To my daughter Claire, I leave the property at 14 Ridge Road, Silver Fork, Colorado, together with all outbuildings and appurtenances thereto. A pause followed, filled with nothing. That concludes the specific bequests to Miss Claire Whitfield. The tri-folded copy of the will slid across the table to Claire. The paper was warm from Daniel's hand. Rebecca did not look up. They took the house on Mapleton Avenue. They took the account at Wells Fargo. They took the dealership shares and the 2 paid-off cars in the garage. And the insurance they thought was the only insurance. They did not take the cabin. They laughed about the cabin. What Daniel and Rebecca Whitfield did not know. What they could not have known because their father had spent 25 years making sure they didn't. Was that the one thing they threw at their sister was the only thing in the estate that had ever mattered? And in 6 months, it would prove it. There was a map tucked behind a photograph. There was a locked steel cabinet in a room that had no door. There were 9 reel-to-reel tapes recorded in a voice she had been missing for 6 weeks. There was a sealed envelope in a small-town bank vault, waiting for a key she had not yet found. But we are not there yet. To understand what Claire found under the floor of that cabin, you first have to understand what her brother and sister took from her in a Boulder lawyer's office, and what her father had done, quietly in the years none of them were watching. Her name was Claire Whitfield, and this is what she lost before she found it. Claire Whitfield had grown up the third and last child of Tom and Marion Whitfield, in a 2-story house on Mapleton Avenue in North Boulder, a house Tom had bought in 1987 for $118,000 and finished the basement of himself, 1 weekend at a time, over a period of 11 years. Marion died of ovarian cancer when Claire was 19, a slow, drawn-out passage across the winter and spring of 2010. Daniel was already gone by then, 27, and living in Denver with a sales job and a new condo. Rebecca was 24 and engaged, staying at her fiancé's family's place in Louisville during the worst of it. Close enough to drive in, but far enough to sleep, without hearing the sound of a house becoming quieter. Claire dropped a semester of community college and moved home. She never really moved out again. She worked as a bookkeeper for a small accounting practice on Broadway called Halden and Kite, 3 days a week, sometimes 4. Her boss, a man named Ephraim Halden, once told her she could read a ledger faster than anyone he had ever hired. She had thought it was flattery, until she noticed that Ephraim, who did not flatter, said it in the presence of a client, during a meeting, while the client was listening. She read the mail. She paid the bills. She drove Tom to his cardiologist appointments, starting in 2019, when the first stent went in. She drove him to the second appointment, and the third, and the ones after that, the ones that became routine, the ones where the waiting room magazines stopped being interesting and started being familiar. When his memory started to slip in late 2021, small things first, then larger ones, she was the one who noticed. She was the one who found his keys in the freezer. She was the one who found his truck running in the driveway with no one in it. She was the one who sat with him at the kitchen table on Mapleton and said gently that maybe they should talk to the doctor about what was happening. and she was the one who saw his face when he understood what she meant. She had a boyfriend once, a park ranger named Wyatt, in 2017. He asked her to move to Estes Park with him. She said she couldn't because of her father. She and Wyatt were still Facebook friends. She had not opened his profile in 3 years. The profile picture was him and a dog on a trail, and she had looked at it once, for a long time, and then closed the app and made dinner. Twice a year, every year without fail. Since Claire was small, Tom drove her up to Silver Fork. 2 hours northwest, past Nederland, past a series of switchbacks that scared her the first 50 times, and stopped scaring her the 51st. He kept a cabin up there. He worked on it. He was always working on it, always carrying lumber, or patching a roof, or rehanging a door that the winter had shifted in its frame. Daniel called it Dad's midlife thing. Rebecca called it Dad's dumb little cabin. On those trips, Tom talked about the land, not in a way she understood then. He would point at rock outcrops along the road and say the words quartz vein and pyrite float and tungsten scheelite, the way other fathers said, "Look at that hawk." She had liked the sound of the words. She had not asked what they meant. She had liked the way her father said them, the way his voice changed when he talked about rock, the way he became a different person on those drives, someone lighter, someone who had put something down for a few hours. So when her father died on a Sunday morning in late August, in his own bed on Mapleton Avenue, with Claire holding his hand and a mug of tea going cold on the nightstand, she did not think, in the days that followed, to protect herself. She had spent 13 years believing love was what you gave, not what you kept accounts of. 6 weeks after Tom's death, Claire had not yet contested anything, because there was nothing to contest. The will she and her father had reviewed together in the fall of 2020, drafted by a lawyer named Marcus Wentz in Boulder, split the estate 3 ways evenly. She had a copy of it in her father's filing cabinet at home. She had assumed the reading would be a formality. Then Daniel scheduled the reading with a different lawyer, a man named Reeve. She had not asked why. She had assumed Daniel was being Daniel. The attorney, Reeve, opened the folder. This will was executed on August 4th, 2023. August 4th was 19 days before Tom's death. He read it flat, without looking up. The house on Mapleton Avenue, to Daniel. The Wells Fargo brokerage account, valued at $412,000, to Daniel and Rebecca jointly. The dealership shares, Tom's remaining minority stake in Whitfield Auto House in Denver, to Daniel outright. The 2018 Lexus and the 2020 Chevrolet Silverado, to Rebecca. The $180,000 term life insurance policy through State Farm, split between Daniel and Rebecca. Then the specific bequest to Claire. The property at 14 Ridge Road, Silver Fork. Claire quietly said, "There's a different will." From 2020, Marcus Wentz drafted it. Reeve, without looking up, said, "That will was superseded by this one, Miss Whitfield. My client, your father, signed this document in front of 2 witnesses on August 4th. It is properly executed, and to my knowledge, uncontested." Daniel, softer than Claire expected, said, "Claire, he changed his mind. It happens." Rebecca, not looking at her, said, "He wanted the house to stay in the family. He wanted Dan to have it, because Dan has the kids." Claire said, "Dan doesn't have kids." A beat, "Dan has never had kids." Rebecca, correcting, said, "He wants kids." Daniel, moving on, said, "We got you the cabin, Claire. You loved the cabin. You always went up there with him. He knew that." This was the sentence Daniel had rehearsed. He had rehearsed it because he needed Claire to accept the cabin as a gift, given rather than what it was, which was what was left when everything else was taken. Claire signed nothing. She asked for a copy of the will. Reeves slid it across the table. The paper was warm from Daniel's hand. She walked out. She did not cry until she got to the parking garage on Walnut Street, where the concrete echoed and no one could see her, and she sat in the Subaru for 20 minutes with her forehead on the steering wheel. Claire returned to the rental unit at 1247 Alpine Avenue, the 2-bedroom apartment she and Tom had moved into in 2019, when the stairs at Mapleton had gotten too much for him, and sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open. Checking account, $2,847.19. Savings, $611. Her car, the 2009 Subaru Outback, had 214,000 miles on it and needed a timing belt she had been putting off for a year. The lease on the Alpine Avenue apartment was in her father's name and expired in 30 days. Daniel, as executor and now owner of the Mapleton house, was not going to renew it for her. He had said so, in the car, on the way to the funeral. "We'll figure out the living situation after." On the counter, in the pile of mail she had not yet opened since her father's death, was a letter from the Gilpin County Assessor's Office. Balance due on the Silver Fork parcel, $11,400.16. 4 years of unpaid property tax. Redemption deadline February 1st. Failure to pay would result in the property being sold at tax auction. She read the letter twice. Then she laughed, once, because there was nothing else to do. Her siblings had been saying things about the cabin for years. Daniel, one Thanksgiving, saying Dad spends every weekend up at that shack, and if he'd put half that effort into the dealership, we'd be running the state. Rebecca, on the phone with her husband. Not knowing Claire was in the next room, saying, "I don't know why he doesn't just sell it. It's falling down. It's literally falling down." And their mother, Marion, in 2009, the year before she died, saying gently, "Your father needs something that's his. Let him have it." Reeve had left, in the folder, an optional disclaimer form. Sign it, and the cabin would be added back into the residual estate, sold at auction, and the proceeds after the tax lien split between Daniel and Rebecca. Reeve had suggested she consider it. Daniel had suggested it too, in the elevator gently. "You don't want that thing, Claire. Let us handle it." She did not sign the disclaimer. She did not sign it that afternoon, and she did not sign it that week. And by the second week, she had made a different decision. She was going to drive up there and see the thing for herself. Not to keep it, just to see it. That was what she told herself. It was almost true. She left Boulder on a Saturday morning in the third week of October, with a duffel bag in the back seat, and a thermos on the passenger seat, and no idea that the drive would be the last one she ever made as the person she had been. 2 hours and 11 minutes from Alpine Avenue to the turnoff at Silver Fork. Up Highway 119, past Nederland, past a diner called Kate's, that Tom had taken her to 100 times, past the last cell service marker at mile 43. The Subaru made a noise on the switchbacks that she did not want to think about. The aspens above Nederland were finished, mostly. The gold was on the ground now, in long yellow drifts against the pines. A dusting of snow on the higher ground. Claire had not thought to bring a heavier coat than the rust-brown wool one she wore to work. She had grabbed it off the hook on her way out, because it was closest to the door. Brown boots. A satchel over her shoulder. The things she carried were the things that were nearest. Silver Fork proper sat at the end of the valley, population 340. One paved road, a general store called Berman's, a post office the size of a walk-in closet, a bar called The Otter, and at the far end of the road, a small brick bank with a hand-painted sign, Silver Fork Community Bank, St. 1962. The turn-off for Ridge Road was a quarter-mile past the bank, on the left, unmarked. 2 miles of graded dirt, climbing. Ponderosa and lodgepole pine on both sides. A rustic wooden rail fence on the right, mostly still standing, some of it new-looking. Someone had been keeping the fence up. Claire noticed, and did not yet know what to do with the noticing. The cabin itself. 2 rooms, log construction, moss on the north-facing side, a covered porch with a wooden bench her father had built. She had sat on that bench when she was 6. There was a photograph of her sitting on it, and she would find that photograph in an hour, and it would matter more than she yet knew. The wooden shingle roof was patched, poorly in places, well in others. The door was padlocked. The key, Tom's key, brass, wrapped in a strip of masking tape with 14RR written on it in her father's block letters, was in the manila envelope the attorney Reeve had given her. Inside, a wood stove, cold. A sink, dry, the water shut off for the season. A hand pump on the counter beside the sink. A single bed with a wool blanket folded neatly at its foot. A table. 2 chairs. A shelf of books, mostly geology texts, some paperbacks. She recognized a Cormac McCarthy and a Wallace Stegner. On the wall above the table, a framed photograph of a girl of 6, on a wooden bench, in a red coat, holding a rock in both hands. Her father had taken that picture. Claire remembered him taking it. She did not yet remember the rock. The condition of the place was exactly what had been described. The floor sagged in the northwest corner. The chinking between the logs was cracked in 3 places. A window in the back room was covered with a piece of plywood. The property tax bill was $11,400.16, and rising. Her siblings had not been wrong about any of this. They had been wrong about only one thing, that this was all there was. On Claire's second morning at the cabin, she had stayed the first night on the single bed, in her coat, because she had not built up the courage to try the wood stove. She opened the door, and there was a dog on the porch. Lean, brindle-coated, mountain dog of no particular breed, with a white blaze on its chest and a torn left ear that had healed badly. It did not move when she opened the door. It looked at her the way a dog looks at someone it has been waiting for. She said aloud, "You're not mine." The dog agreed by not moving. Claire went back inside, cut a piece off the sandwich she had brought from Berman's, and set it on the porch. The dog ate it. It did not leave. By the end of the day Claire had named it, provisionally, Ridley, for the ridge above the cabin from which it seemed to have come. The framed picture of 6-year-old Claire, on the porch bench, had been hanging above the table for as long as she could remember. On the third morning she took it down to dust it. The back of the frame had been resealed, not with the original paper backing, but with a piece of manila envelope cut to fit, taped along the edges with what looked like recent tape. The tape was still tacky. Someone had been in this frame within the last year. Claire hesitated. Opening it felt like opening her father's mail. Then she remembered that her father had left her this cabin, and everything in it, on purpose. She sat down at the table with the frame and a paring knife from the kitchen drawer. Inside the frame, folded once, was a piece of tracing paper, brittle at the folds. She unfolded it on the table. It was a hand-drawn map, her father's hand. Unmistakable, the same block letters as on the key. The map showed the 12-acre parcel of 14 Ridge Road in ink, and around it, in pencil, 3 other parcels labeled with survey codes she did not recognize. Along the eastern edge of the property, a dotted line snaked from the cabin down toward what she thought must be a creek. Beside the dotted line, in her father's writing, NNW Vane, see log, tape 3. Tape 3. Not journal 3, not notebook 3, tape 3. Claire stood up from the table and looked around the cabin. There was no tape player. There were no tapes visible. There was a shelf of books, a bed, a stove, a table, 2 chairs. She checked the shelf. Nothing. She checked the drawer of the small nightstand. Nothing. She took the map in her hand and walked outside. The dotted line led east from the cabin, across a small clearing, down through a stand of lodgepole pines, to a shallow creek she had not noticed the first day because there was no water in it. It was a seasonal wash, dry in October, cut down about 3 feet into the earth. Along its banks, at intervals, she found 4 wooden survey stakes, driven into the ground and painted with fading orange paint. On each stake, in her father's block letters, TW 14, TW 15, TW 16, TW 17. She had walked over one of them her first afternoon, and not seen it. Ridley followed her, walked 10 feet behind her the entire way, sat when she sat, moved when she moved. On the back of the tracing paper map, she now noticed, was a short note in the same hand as the front. 4 lines. Claire, if you're looking at this map, you're standing on your own land. Not just the cabin, not just the 12 acres. I'll explain the rest when you find the cellar. Look under the stove. She walked back to the cabin faster than she had walked out. Ridley kept up. She knelt on the plank floor in front of the wood stove and looked at the hearth. It was a stone hearth, roughly 2 feet by 3 feet, built of flat river stones set into mortar. She had sat cross-legged on it as a child while her father built fires. She had never once thought of it as a lid. She sat there for a long time, long enough that the light through the west window moved from the table to the floor, long enough that Ridley curled up beside her and went to sleep. What her father had spent 25 years hiding was 6 inches beneath her hand, and she had not yet lifted a single stone. It was almost dark when she reached for the first stone. The stones of the hearth were mortared, but the mortar was old and, in one corner, cracked. Claire found she could lift the northeast stone with her fingers if she rocked it. She lifted it. Under it, another stone. Under that stone, an iron ring set flush into a wooden panel. She had grown up looking at that hearth. She had never seen the ring. Her father had built the hearth in such a way that the stones had to be lifted in a specific order. Northeast first, then east, then southeast, to expose the ring. If you took them in any other order, the ring stayed hidden by the stone above it. The ring was cold. The panel below it was oak, 4 feet by 3 feet, hinged on the far side. She got both hands on the ring and pulled. The panel lifted heavier than she expected, and a breath of cold air came up from below her. The specific dry cold of a well-built cellar, not the damp cold of a hole in the ground. Ridley took 2 steps back and would not come closer. Beneath the panel, a wooden ladder, 5 rungs, leading down into dark. A cord hanging beside it, obviously a light pull. She tugged it, and to her astonishment, a bulb came on below her. A single bare bulb, wired into what she would later realize was a small solar bank her father had installed in a lean-to on the north side of the cabin that she had assumed was a wood store. The cabin had power, just not upstairs. A room roughly 10 feet by 12, dug down into the earth beneath the cabin and reinforced with concrete block. Not a hole, a room. Dry, cool, wired for a single light. Along the north wall, a workbench with an old surveyor's transit on a tripod beside it, and a set of rock hammers and chisels hung on pegboard, each in its outline drawn in marker. A rock saw at the end of the bench, boxes of specimen bags, a row of small labeled jars with rock chips and mineral samples, each labeled in her father's block letters. TW 14 QTZ, TW 14 Skiolite, TW 15 Galener, TW 17 AGPB. Along the east wall, a green steel filing cabinet, 4 drawers tall, padlocked at the top. Along the south wall, a shelf of green cardboard document boxes, each labeled by year, 1998, 1999, 2000, 2001, 2002, running along the entire wall to 2023. 26 boxes, 26 years of something. Along the west wall, a small wooden desk. On the desk, a reel-to-reel tape machine, and beside it, a stack of 9 tapes in their cardboard cases. The tapes were labeled Survey Log, Silver Fork, Vein NNW, Tape 1 through Tape 9. On the desk, propped against the tape machine, an envelope, Claire's name on the front. Her father's writing. The letter was short. It was not the sealed final letter, the one that would come later. Claire unfolded it and read, "Claire, if you're reading this, you found the ring. I'm going to guess it was easier than I thought. You always did have a light hand with things that other people wrenched. I built this room in the summer of 2001, the year after I retired from the survey. I did most of it myself. A man named Frank Berman from town helped me with the concrete. He is still alive. He is a friend. If you need him, he is at the store. What I have been doing down here is not a secret from the law. It is only a secret from your brother and your sister. Every report in the Green Cabinet is filed properly with the county and the state. The claim is perfected. The land is yours. I want you to sit in this chair and take a breath, because you are about to understand something that will make you very angry with me for a little while, and I am sorry for that in advance. Open the Green Cabinet next. The key is behind the row of jars, taped to the wall. I love you, Dad." Claire found the key, taped exactly where he said it would be, behind the jar labeled TWW-17AGPB. She did not immediately open the cabinet. She sat down in the wooden chair her father sat in, for 22 years and cried for the first time since the parking garage. When she stopped crying, she put the key in the lock. The green steel cabinet was government surplus stock from what looked like the 1970s. The manufacturer's tag inside the top drawer read, "On DES Wines, Iowa." The padlock opened cleanly. The drawers slid on ball bearings that had been oiled recently. Each drawer was neatly labeled on the front in a strip of masking tape. Assays 1998 to 2005. Assays 2006 to 2013. Assays 2014 to 2019. Legal and Finance. Drawer 1 held 7 assay reports from a lab called Rocky Mountain Analytical in Golden, Colorado, dated 1998 through 2005. Each report was on the letterhead of a licensed lab. Each was signed by a PhD geochemist named Dr. Helen Ostrander. Each documented ore samples pulled from stakes TWW17. The 1998 report noted trace silver and lead-zinc mineralization. The 2003 report noted economic-grade silver values at TW-17, 12.4 troy ounces per ton, in a 2-foot sampled interval, with associated tungsten scheelite values at TW14 running 0.48% tungsten trioxide over an 11-foot interval. The numbers were not the numbers of a hobbyist's fantasy. They were the numbers of a real deposit, documented by a licensed professional on letterhead with signatures. Drawer 2 held 9 more reports, 2006 through 2013. The values held. In 2 reports, they climbed. The scheelite intercept at 2W14 in 2011 hit 0.61% tungsten trioxide over 16 feet. Drawer 3 held 7 reports, 2014 through 2019. In 2019, a report Claire would later realize was the most important document in the cabinet. A formal ore reserve estimate, prepared by a mining consultancy in Denver called Foothill Resource Advisors, LLC. Addressed to T. Whitfield, Silver Fork, Colorado, estimating in situ metal value on the perfected mineral claim at approximately $2,100,000, subject to standard recovery and market assumptions. Drawer 4. Legal and Finance. The recorded mineral claim, filed at the Gilpin County Recorder's Office in 1999, in the name of Thomas H. Whitfield, with annual maintenance filings every year through 2023. The 2024 filing was not yet done. A deed in trust, dated June 12, 2020, executed by Tom Whitfield and witnessed by Marcus Wentz, Boulder attorney, placing the 12-acre surface parcel and the associated mineral claim into an irrevocable trust with Claire Whitfield as sole beneficiary. $86,000 in bearer bonds, a mix of pre-1983 U.S. Treasury bonds and Colorado municipal bonds Tom had acquired quietly over decades, in 6 unmarked manila envelopes, each envelope with the bond values written in pencil on the outside. Total face value, $86,000, and a single-page document titled State Farm Life Insurance Rider, Policy 4471-88, listing Claire Whitfield as sole beneficiary of a $250,000 term rider filed directly with State Farm on August 1, 2023, 3 days before the revised will. Clipped to the top of the Legal and Finance drawer was a second letter. Claire unfolded it and read, Claire, I put this land into a trust for you in June of 2020, 2 months before I signed the will you and I read together. I did it because I did not trust your brother, and I did not trust the will. I did not tell you because I did not want you to have to carry it. That was cowardice on my part. I am sorry. The claim I filed in 1999 is a real claim. The vein at TW17 is not the largest silver deposit in Colorado. It is a modest one. But it is mine, and now it is yours. The consultancy in Denver, Foothill, has appraised it fairly. Their number is a good starting number. Do not sell it to the first person who offers. Do not sell it in a hurry. If your brother comes looking, which he will, do not tell him about this room. Not yet. Let him find out the way I would want him to find out, from a lawyer, in a room where he cannot raise his voice. The bonds in this drawer are for you to live on while you figure out what to do. There is enough there to give you 2 years without a paycheck. Use them. Do not spend them on Daniel's problems. Do not spend them on Rebecca's guilt. The insurance rider is separate. State Farm will pay it directly. Call them. Ask for a woman named Denise Coyle. She knows. I want you to understand something. I did not leave you this cabin because it was the last thing on the list. I left you this cabin because it is the first thing on mine. Dad. Claire drives into Silver Fork the next morning, with Ridley in the back seat of the Subaru, because Ridley now belongs to her, whether either of them has agreed to it. She asks Frank Berman at the general store whether her father ever mentioned a woman named Helen Ostrander. Frank says yes. She was up here twice a year for a decade. Frank Berman also said something else that Claire did not at first understand. He said, "Your father told me, the last time he was in the store, that if a man in a navy suit ever came asking about the property, I was to tell him nothing." He looked at Claire. That was 3 weeks ago. 2 nights later, after Claire had spent a day driving back to Boulder to pack up the Alpine Avenue apartment, Daniel had, in fact, refused to renew the lease. A text on Wednesday morning from Rebecca had said, "Dan says the 15th. Non-negotiable, I'm sorry." Claire came back up to Silver Fork with everything she owned in the Subaru and the dog on the passenger seat. She did not tell either sibling where she was. On her first evening back, she went down into the cellar and pulled a tape at random. Tape 4. She threaded it onto the reel-to-reel machine. She had watched a YouTube video that afternoon on a friend's Wi-Fi at Kate's Diner in Nederland on how to thread a reel-to-reel. She pressed play. Her father's voice, dry and matter-of-fact, filled the cellar. It was so unexpected that Ridley, at the top of the ladder, whined. Tape 4 opened. Field log, Silver Fork parcel, spring recording, May 14, 2011. Tom Whitfield speaking. Weather clear, ground dry. Snow line at approximately 10,200 feet. I'm at stake TW14 with Helen Ostrander of Rocky Mountain Analytical. We've pulled the 11th core off the Scheelite intercept, and Helen thinks the grade is holding. She's going to run it Monday. Personal note. Claire's birthday is Sunday. I need to drive down for it. She's turning 21 and I can't miss it. Note to self. Pick up flowers at the place on Broadway that she likes, not the grocery store. The tapes were, in fact, this. 22 years of a man's work, narrated to himself with occasional personal asides. Some tapes were mostly technical. Some were mostly reflection. Tape 6, from 2016, contained a long section in which Tom talked to himself about Marion, his late wife, and about what he thought she would have said about the vein. Tape 7, from 2019, contained a section where Tom talked, unprompted, about Claire, about the way she took care of him, about the way Daniel and Rebecca had, one at a time, stopped coming to the house. The tapes were, cumulatively, the closest thing to sitting in a room with her father again that Claire would ever have. She listened to them in the cellar, alone, over the course of 8 nights. On the 8th night, she threaded tape 9, the personal section her father recorded in June 2023, 2 months before he died. Field log, Silver Fork parcel, June 8, 2023. Tom Whitfield speaking. This will be the last tape, I think. My cardiologist doesn't like the last set of readings, and I don't like them either. I'm going to keep this one short, and I'm going to keep it personal. Claire. If you are listening to this in the cellar, you have already read the letters, and you already know the shape of the thing. So I want to use this tape for something else. I want to tell you why. You were 6 years old the first time I brought you up here. You picked up a rock, a piece of quartz float, with a fleck of scheelite in it that caught the light, and you asked me what it was. I told you it was a rock that had metal in it, and you asked me what the metal was for, and I said it was for making things stronger. You said, "That's a good rock." And you carried it home. It is in the top drawer of the desk down there right now, in a small box. Open the drawer and look. I have thought about that afternoon a great many times over the years. I did not know then that you were the one who would come with me. But I know now, You were the one who came with me. Every time. Your brother did not come. Your sister did not come. You came. This land is yours because you were the one who ever cared about it. Nothing more complicated than that. I love you, kid. Dad. Claire opens the drawer. The rock is there, in a small cardboard box, labeled in her father's block letters, CAIAH6. First pick. She takes it out of the box. She holds it in her hand for a long time. Then she puts it in the pocket of her rust-colored coat. She does not yet know that Daniel drove up to Silver Fork 3 weeks before their father's death and paid a title company in Idaho Springs to run a search on 14 Ridge Road. She does not yet know that the title company returned a clean surface title and no mineral information, because mineral claims are recorded separately and the title company did not check that recorder. She does not yet know that Daniel drove away thinking he understood the property. She will know all of this in 6 days. The next morning, Rebecca's car came up the road. Claire had not, at first, understood the small object she found taped inside the cardboard case of tape 9. She had rewound the tape and put it back in its case, and then, out of habit, checked the inside of the case for anything her father might have slipped there. Taped to the inside lid of the cardboard case, a small brass key, older than any key on Claire's own keyring. Attached to the key with a piece of thin wire, a paper tag, and on the tag, in her father's block letters, Silver Fork Community Bank, Box 47. Claire drove into town the next morning and walked into the small brick bank at the far end of Silver Fork's one paved road. The teller, a woman in her 60s named Alma Hyde, looked at the key and did not need to see any other identification. She said, "You're Tom's Claire." Claire said yes. Alma said, "Follow me." The vault at Silver Fork Community Bank was not a vault exactly. It was a small back room with a row of 36 boxes, 3 deep, in a wall of nickel-plated doors. Box 47 was on the bottom right. Alma turned the bank's key. Claire turned her father's key. The door opened. Alma left. Inside the box, a single manila envelope, sealed with red wax, an actual seal, pressed with a stamp Claire recognized as her father's old surveyor's stamp, with 3 words on the outside in her father's block letters, for Claire. Last. Claire did not open the envelope. Not there, not that morning. She did not open it at the cabin that afternoon either. She had learned, in the last 4 weeks, that her father had left her things in the order in which he wanted her to open them. She had opened the map when the map was ready to be opened. She had opened the cabinet when the cabinet was ready. She had listened to the tapes when the tapes were ready. This envelope, she understood, was not yet ready. Or more precisely, she was not. On the back of the envelope, beneath the wax seal, in her father's writing, "Claire, do not open this until Daniel and Rebecca have shown you who they are. You already know, but make them show you. Then open this. It will tell you what to do." Dad. Claire drives back up to the cabin. She sets the sealed envelope on the mantel. She sits on the porch bench, the same one from the photograph, with Ridley beside her, and she watches the light come off the ridge to the west. She has in her jacket pocket the piece of quartz her father saved for 27 years. She has, in the cellar, 22 years of tapes and 23 assay reports, and $86,000 in bonds, and a deed in trust that means the cabin was never her siblings to take. She has, at State Farm, a $250,000 rider they do not know exists. She does not tell them any of it. She waits. She did not have to wait long. There is a moment coming, in about 6 minutes of listening, when Claire's sister will come up that dirt road with a lawyer's letter in her hand, and I do not want you to miss it. So if this story has been worth your time so far, take 1 second and subscribe. And know that when you do, you are telling this channel to keep finding the ones like her, the ones the family threw away. Now, Rebecca's car. A charcoal grey Volvo XC90 came up the dirt road on a Wednesday morning in the first week of November. Rebecca got out in a beige wool coat that was, Claire noticed, entirely wrong for the temperature. Rebecca had dressed for a bolder day, not a mountain morning. Rebecca had not been to the cabin in 19 years. She looked at the porch. She looked at Ridley. who had come out and sat beside Claire. She said, "You've been up here a month." Rebecca said she had come because she was worried about Claire. She said she had come because Daniel had said some things she did not agree with, and she wanted Claire to know she did not agree. She said she had come to see if there was anything Claire needed. In her hand, Rebecca was not good at hiding things she was carrying, was a manila envelope with the return address of a Denver law firm, Brennan, White and Greco. Claire had not seen that firm on any document before. It was not Reeves' firm. It was not Marcus Wentz's firm. It was a new firm. They sat on the porch. Rebecca began with concern. Claire let her talk. Rebecca got to it around the halfway point. "Dan thinks, and I want to be clear that this is Dan, not me, Dan thinks there might be some irregularities with the property. With the way Dad set things up, he wanted me to ask you, as your sister, not as anybody's lawyer, whether you had found anything up here. Any papers, I don't know what he thinks is up here, Claire, but he's been calling me about it for 2 weeks. Any papers, not the will, not documents about the estate, papers," which meant Daniel already suspected the papers existed, which meant Daniel had been looking. Claire did not lie. She did not tell the truth either, she said. "I've been going through Dad's things." Rebecca looked relieved. Claire said, "I haven't found anything I didn't expect to find," which was technically true. She had expected, on some level, that her father had left her more than a shack. She had not been able to say so to herself until now. Rebecca's second question, quieter. "Are you okay for money, Claire?" And this was the first thing Rebecca had asked her, in 4 weeks, that sounded like her sister, and not like Daniel's messenger. Claire looked at her for a long moment. She said, "I have enough for now." Rebecca started to cry. Rebecca said, "I'm so sorry, Claire." Claire did not say anything. Rebecca leaves without the envelope's contents being handed over. She takes it back to her car. She does not, that day, deliver the letter Daniel had sent her to deliver. She drives back to Boulder. She does not tell Daniel that she did not deliver it. Whatever Daniel had sent his sister up the mountain to do, his sister had not done it. The letter arrived by certified mail 3 days later, from Brennan, White and Greco, addressed to Miss Claire Whitfield at 14 Ridge Road, Silver Fork. Daniel Whitfield, in his capacity as personal representative of the estate of Thomas H. Whitfield, was formally requesting an accounting of any assets located on or associated with the property at 14 Ridge Road. It alleged that the property may contain assets that should have been included in the estate's inventory, but were not, and that Claire had a legal duty as a beneficiary to disclose them. It threatened, in careful language, a probate contest and a claim of undue influence. The assertion that Tom Whitfield, in his final years, had been improperly influenced by Claire, who was, after all, his caretaker, to move assets out of the estate. It cited the deed in trust of June 2020 as evidence of exactly that. It set a deadline, December 8th, 22 days from receipt. Undue influence claims are one of the standard mechanisms by which siblings contest the actions of a caretaker sibling. The burden of proof is on the challenger, but it is meaningful. Even a losing challenge can freeze assets for a year or more and cost tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees. Daniel does not have to win. Daniel only has to make the fight expensive enough that Claire settles. The stakes were itemized and real. $11,400 and 16 cents in back taxes still owed on the surface parcel. Deadline February 1st. Attorney retainer to defend the challenge. Quoted at $18,000 minimum by the first attorney Claire called in Denver. Time to resolution if fully contested. 9 to 14 months. Claire's available liquid cash, at that moment, not counting the bearer bonds she had not yet cashed, $3,458.19. Daniel's letter named Rebecca as a co-petitioner. Rebecca had not, in fact, agreed to be a co-petitioner. Daniel had forged Rebecca's signature on a document, or, more likely, gotten her to sign something months earlier that he was now repurposing. The ambiguity was deliberate. Claire drove to Denver and met with a probate attorney named Angela Sotomayor, at a firm called Sotomayor and Ling. Sotomayor read the letter, read the deed in trust, and said 3 things. The deed in trust was airtight. Daniel could not get the parcel through probate, because the parcel was not in the estate at the time of death. The undue influence claim, however, was not about probate. It was about clawing back the transfer that put the parcel in the trust in the first place. That transfer happened in June 2020, and Colorado has a statute of limitations. But Daniel's team would argue tolling. Sotomayor's honest professional opinion was that Daniel loses. But losing takes 14 months and $40,000, and Daniel knows it. On the drive back to Silver Fork, Claire pulled over at the switchback above Nederland, where you can see the Eastern Plain. She sat in the Subaru for 20 minutes and did not move. She thought about signing. She thought about calling Daniel and offering him a piece, half the bonds maybe, in exchange for dropping it. She thought about how tired she was. She thought about the envelope on the mantel. She had not opened it. She had promised herself she would not open it until Daniel and Rebecca had shown her who they were. Daniel had now shown her. Claire drove back to the cabin. The first snow of the season was coming down, dry, blowing off the ridge. Ridley was on the porch when the Subaru pulled up, exactly where Claire left her. Claire was a bookkeeper. She read a document faster than either of her siblings could read a paragraph. That night, at the table in the cabin, she read Daniel's letter for the 5th time, and on the 5th reading, she noticed something. The letter was signed by Daniel as personal representative of the estate of Thomas H. Whitfield. But the will's opening lines, the revised will of August 4, 2023, named Daniel as personal representative of the residuary estate. The cabin was a specific bequest, not part of the residuary, and the June 2020 trust transfer had never been in any part of any estate. Daniel, in his letter, was asserting standing over an asset he did not have standing over. More important, the revised will of August 4, 2023 was itself potentially defective. Claire, at the table, pulled out the copy Reeve gave her and read it, really read it, for the first time. She noticed that the witness signatures were dated August 4th, but the notary block was dated August 6th. That was not necessarily fatal, but it was not clean. In Colorado, will formalities require contemporaneous witnessing. Claire called Sotomayor in the morning. She told her about the witness and notary discrepancy. Sotomayor said, quietly, "That is interesting. Send it to me." Claire scanned it at the Silver Fork Bank. Alma Hyde had a printer and scanner she let locals use. She sent it to Sotomayor. Sotomayor called back the same afternoon. The witnesses on the August 4th will were 2 employees of Reeve's law office. This was legal in Colorado, but not preferred. More importantly, one of the witnesses, a paralegal named Yvette Marston, had not actually been in the office on August 4th, 2023. She had been on a scheduled vacation in Mexico. Sotomayor's office pulled Marston's LinkedIn, cross-checked with her Facebook, and had photographs of her on a beach in Cozumel time-stamped August 3 through 7, 2023. Daniel's revised will was fraudulent. Not just contestable, actively fraudulent, with a forged witness signature, which meant Reeve was either complicit or grossly negligent, which meant Daniel was exposed on a scale he had not begun to imagine. The original 2020 will, drafted by Marcus Wentz, the one that split everything 3 ways evenly, was very likely the operative will. That evening Rebecca called Claire. She was crying. She said she had just gotten off the phone with Sotomayor's office, who called her to confirm her signature on the co-petition. She said she never signed a co-petition. She said Daniel had her sign what he told her was a family authorization for the estate lawyer to communicate with her, months ago. She said she was done. She said she would testify. She said, "Claire, I know what I did. I know what I let him do. I do not expect you to forgive me. I want you to win." Claire's response was not warmth. Not yet. She said, "Come up here on Saturday. Not with Dan, just you. There's something I want to show you." Rebecca came. Claire showed her only the porch bench and the framed photograph of 6-year-old Claire, and the view down to the creek. Not the cellar. Not the tapes. Not the envelope on the mantel. Not yet. Rebecca sat on the porch bench and did not speak for a long time. When she spoke, she said, "Dad brought me up here once, when I was 11. I hated it. I told him I hated it. I don't think he ever asked me again." Claire said nothing. Rebecca said, "You went every time, didn't you?" Claire said, "Yes." Rebecca said, "I'm sorry." After Rebecca left, Claire went inside. She took the sealed envelope off the mantel. She looked at it. She did not quite open it. "Not yet," she said aloud to the empty cabin. "One more thing, Dad. Show me one more thing." The next morning, Sotomayor called with the last piece. Reeve, the attorney who read the revised will, had, under a subpoena from Sotomayor's office, and the informal pressure of a bar complaint, turned over his file on the August 4th will. In the file was a handwritten note from Daniel to Reeve, dated July 27, 2023, that said, "Marcus Wentz drafted the current one, and Dad's daughter has a copy. We need this done clean and fast, and I need it before mid-August. Bill it to me personally." The note was, in the language of the practice, a smoking gun. Daniel had commissioned a will, Reeve had produced. Both were exposed. The August 4th will was going to be set aside. The original 2020 will, the one Claire and Tom had reviewed together, was the operative will. Under that will, Claire's share of the estate was 1/3. 1/3 of the Mapleton Avenue house, 1/3 of the brokerage account, 1/3 of the dealership shares, 1/3 of the vehicles, 1/3 of the State Farm term policy. The cabin was never Daniel's or Rebecca's to give her. It was hers before their father died, through the 2020 trust. It was hers through both wills as a specific bequest. It was hers, no matter what. Daniel and Rebecca had, in the Boulder lawyer's office in October, given her something that had been hers for 3 years already. Claire opened the envelope. Late afternoon, she was sitting at the table in the cabin. Ridley was on the floor beside her. She broke the wax seal with her thumbnail. She unfolded the paper. She read, "Claire, if you are reading this letter, then you have done what I asked. You have let your brother and your sister be what they are, and you have waited until they were ready to be seen. I am proud of you for waiting. I could not have. I want to tell you something that I never told you when I was alive, because I did not want you to carry it, and I want to tell you now because you can. The land under this cabin is not a fortune. It is enough. It is enough that you will never have to work a job you do not love again, unless you choose to. It is enough that you can restore this cabin and hire the 2 men in Silver Fork, Frank Berman and a man named Elliot Voss, who lives out on County 6, who helped me build it. It is enough that if you want to start something with your name on it, in this valley, you can. It is not more than that. Anyone who tells you it is more than that is trying to sell you something. I did not leave it to you to make you rich. I left it to you because you were the one who saw me. Your mother saw me. You saw me. Nobody else did. Your brother is going to be exposed for what he did. I made sure of that before I signed anything he wanted me to sign. Marcus Wentz has a file. Angela Sotomayor. If she is the one you found, she is the one I hoped you would find. Her mother was a friend of your mother's. We'll know where to look. Your sister is not lost. She was a coward, and cowards can be brought back. Bring her back on your terms, not hers. The rock in your pocket is the first piece of ore you ever picked up. You were 6. I saved it because you gave it to me. Everything in this cabin is a version of that rock. You gave me a life, kid. This is me giving one back. I love you, Dad." She sits at the table with the letter in her hand and the light going gold through the west window. And for the first time in 8 weeks, she does not feel like she is standing at the edge of something. She feels like she is standing in the middle of it, and it is hers. Sotomayor filed, on Claire's behalf, in Boulder District Court. The August 4th will was challenged for forgery. The forensic evidence, Yvette Marston's Cozumel photographs, Reeve's own file with Daniel's July 27th note, the notary discrepancy, was not close. Reeve resigned from his firm within a week. The Colorado Supreme Court's Office of Attorney Regulation opened a formal inquiry. Daniel was not criminally charged in the end. Sotomayor advised Claire that a criminal case for probate fraud was slow, uncertain, and would take another 2 years. Claire declined to press. But civilly, Daniel was stripped of his role as personal representative. The 2020 will was admitted to probate. The estate, the house, the brokerage, the dealership shares was redivided. 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Daniel lost 2/3 of what he took. He also lost the dealership itself. The minority partners at Whitfield Auto House, on learning of the forgery, exercised a morals clause buyout in their partnership agreement and forced his exit at a discount. He was not destitute. He was smaller. He was always going to be smaller. The truth had just been slower than his ambition. Rebecca had already returned her share of the revised will's overage to the estate, voluntarily, in September, on Sotomayor's advice, before the case was filed. This was used in her favor. She was not sanctioned. Claire, when asked in a deposition whether she believes her sister acted in bad faith, said, "I believe my sister was afraid of my brother and afraid of herself. I do not think she is the same person now that she was in that lawyer's office." Rebecca in the gallery cried. In the middle of the deposition, opposing counsel asked Claire what the cabin at 14 Ridge Road was worth. Claire said, "The appraisal from Foothill Resource Advisors is $1.9 million for the mineral rights. The surface land at current comparable values in Gilpin County is another $240,000. The bearer bonds in the cellar were $86,000 at face. The life insurance rider was $250,000. So, in the terms you're asking, about $2.5 million. A pause. But that was never the point. The total realized value approximately $2.8 million before Claire's 1/3 share of the Redivid estate, which added another approximately $310,000 on top. That was the number. It was stated once, and it was not stated again. Claire drove Rebecca up to Silver Fork in the last week of March. The snow was off the lower slopes, still on the peaks. Ridley was in the back seat. They stopped at Berman's for coffee. Frank Berman came out from behind the counter and hugged Claire without saying anything. Frank looked at Rebecca. He said, "You're Tom's other one." Rebecca said, "Yes." Frank said, "Come in whenever you want," and went back behind the counter. At the cabin, Claire took Rebecca down into the cellar for the first time. She showed her the green cabinet. She showed her the tapes. She did not play them. She let Rebecca stand in the room their father spent 22 years in. Rebecca, at the tape machine, said, Can I hear him?" Claire said, "Not yet." Rebecca nodded. She understood. Upstairs, on the porch, Claire handed Rebecca a small piece of paper. On it, in Claire's own handwriting, was a number, $310,000. Rebecca's 1/3 share of the reunified estate under the 2020 will, which Rebecca had already received. Claire said, "This is what Dad wanted you to have. It is not a debt. It is not conditional. I am not buying anything from you, and I am not asking for anything back. I am telling you that this is yours because Dad wanted it to be, and I am telling you that the cabin is mine for the same reason. Are we clear?" Rebecca said, "Yes." Claire said, "Good." Claire took the piece of quartz, 6-year-old Claire's first pick, out of her pocket and held it out to Rebecca. She said, "Do you want to see it?" Rebecca took it. She held it up to the sun. She said quietly, "It's just a rock." Claire said, "I know." They both laughed, the first time either of them had laughed in the other's presence since their father's funeral. Rebecca handed it back. Claire paid off the property tax bill, $11,400.16, with a single bearer bond from the legal and finance drawer on November 20th. She hired Frank Berman and Elliot Voss, the two men her father had named in the sealed letter, to help her restore the cabin over the winter and spring. Frank did the chinking. Elliot rebuilt the northwest corner of the floor. She paid both of them properly and on the books. She did not lease the mineral rights immediately. Sotomayor introduced her to a small Colorado-based mining consultancy, who advised her on a slow, staged approach. Prove out 1 more year of assay work, then negotiate a lease with a mid-sized operator on terms that protected the land and the watershed. Claire, the bookkeeper, understood the numbers of the deal better than the consultants did. She signed a preliminary lease in June on her own terms. First payment, $220,000 against a royalty of 4% of net smelter returns. She kept the cabin. She did not sell it. She lived in it off and on through the following summer, with Ridley beside her. She used $150,000 to seed a scholarship in her father's name at the Colorado School of Mines, the Thomas H. Whitfield Field Scholarship for first-generation students in geology and land surveying. The first two recipients were named in her father's memory the following September. One was a young woman from a town in southern Colorado who had never been to the mountains before Silver Fork. Claire drove her up herself. They sat on the porch bench. The young woman cried. Claire did not say anything, because she had learned from her father that some things did not need to be said. She converted the root cellar into a small field station. The tapes and assay reports were catalogued and archived. The workbench was kept intact. The surveyor's transit was preserved in a display case. On the door at the top of the ladder, she hung a small brass plate that said, in block letters, Tom Whitfield, 1952 to 2023. He came up here every weekend. She did not move back to Boulder. She did not need to. Daniel did not come to Silver Fork. Daniel and Claire exchanged 3 emails over the course of the following year. One from him, apologizing in language his lawyer had clearly reviewed. One from her, acknowledging receipt. One from him, thanking her for that acknowledgement. Claire did not close the door. She did not open it either. She left it as it was. Rebecca came up to Silver Fork 4 times that year. On the 4th visit, in July, Claire played her tape 9. Rebecca cried through all of it. When it was done, Rebecca said, "He knew, didn't he? He knew who we were." Claire said, "Yes." Rebecca said, "I'm going to try to be someone he would have wanted to know." Claire said, "Then try." Late April of the following year, Claire was sitting on the porch bench at the cabin. Ridley was beside her, older now, the torn ear having healed a little more, a grey hair at the muzzle where there had been only brindle. On Claire's lap, the sealed envelope, empty now, folded once. In her hand, the piece of quartz from her father's desk drawer. The sun was coming down over the ridge to the west. The light on the trees was exactly the light in the framed photograph of her at age 6. There is a photograph above the table inside, of a girl on this bench at 6 years old, holding a rock in both hands. The girl in the photograph does not know yet what the rock is for. The woman on the bench does. She holds it the same way. She has held it the same way for 27 years, and she did not know she was holding it, and now she does. That is what her father left her. Not the cabin, not the vein under it, not the money. He left her the fact that she had been the one who came up here with him. He left her the truth that when they took everything, they did not take her. She was the thing he saved, and she is still holding it. Her name was Claire Whitfield. She was 33 years old the morning her father's will was read. By the following spring, she owned 12 acres in the Colorado Rockies, a cabin her father had built with his hands, and the certainty that she had been, all along, the one he had seen. Above the ridge, the light was going. Below the porch, the dog was breathing slow. The rock was warm in her hand. That was enough.